Where's
Oh, yay.
I didn't let the lady grab it.
I didn't hear any.
Just let me know. I don't care what.
Good
Did you
morning.
get budget now?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Top of the morning.
Top of the morning to you, Carlton. Yeah.
I just top that.
Are we allowed to go?
I got no accent.
No, not even a Swedish accent.
She would love that.
Because Carlton with an E is Swedish,
What
right?
Was she proposing
Okay.
Thursday while we're...
Oh, no, actually, hold on.
Oh.
It's
Oh.
Danish.
Can't go there.
It's Danish. Oh, you're Carlton with an O, so you're
Oh.
Swedish.
Yeah,
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 oh,
sure.
I thought it was E for the Danes.
Probably.
Danes. Yeah.
It's Danes.
Yes, Carlson Larsen, Stevenson. Okay, the Vikings. They go back on boats. Okay, I'm coming out of that. Let's begin with a mindfulness exercise that I introduce to clients at Open Towards Freedom. So I'll invite you to assume a posture that has a mix of both relaxation and dignity. And I invite you to close your eyes if you feel so comfortable. If not, rest your gaze a few feet in front of you with a soft focus. And as you do so, just bring your awareness inwards, holding in mind with curiosity the question of what is my experience right now. Just take a few moments to contact directly aspects of your physical, embodied experience. Noticing perhaps your feet on the ground, sense of weight in your chair, any areas of your body that might be asking for some more attention. Just say hello, notice that. If you're aware of any judgments or distractions, that's fine. Just come on back to basic curiosity, your basic experience. Now I'm going to invite you to do a visualization practice. I want you to imagine that you are standing on a bridge overlooking 3 railroad tracks. And on each of these tracks is sort of this infinite train running that has open-topped cars, generally used for carrying ore or coal. All these cars are just empty, waiting to receive things that you will put in them. So when you become aware of a thought that you may be thinking, an image or a memory or a judgment, I want you to just imagine that you can place those in the cars on the leftmost track. Anytime you become aware of a thought, memory, image, judgment, just notice that and place it in one of the cars on the left track. And that car just keeps moving down the track. And if you become distracted or aware of a particular sensation, feeling, get distracted by a sound or an itch of some sort, just notice that and imagine you can just place that, like a piece of coal or a one of the cars that's moving down the center track. And finally, you become distracted by an impulse to act in some way. Maybe to scratch an itch, or to move your position, or to go to the bathroom. And just notice that you've become distracted by an impulse. And imagine that you can place that in one of the cars on the right-hand most track. And as you place a thought, feeling, or impulse in one of the cars, you just return to this neutral, observing place of being on this bridge, watching the contents of your mind as they continue in time along their tracks. Judgments and thoughts on the left, feelings and sensations in the center, impulses to act on the right. And as you do so, just effortlessly return to a place of witness, observation, simply watching the cars on their trains of thought, tracks of feeling. Do this for another minute. More step in this exercise. See if you can notice the difference in the quality of your attention between when you may be on a train of thought or inside the train, as opposed to when you're watching it from the deck, from the bridge. So if you can just get a feel for how it may be different. As a final piece of this meditation, see if you can become aware of that space in which this whole exercise is taking place. Stand with that part of yourself that is aware, not just of the thoughts, feelings, and impulses, but of the whole space in which this visualization is happening. And just stand with that, even if for a brief moment. Letting go of every single piece. Standing in the space of your own awareness. And before you open your eyes, see if you can just guess how many eggs are in the bowl that Dylan brought. And when you're ready to verify, just open your eyes. 3 trains. That's the 3 trains exercise. So you might see it on the Open Towards Freedom's notes. They don't write much on those notes. I just write sort of the exercise that we did. You might see 3 trains. Yeah. What'd you get?
I thought it was either 10 or 11, because I thought he started with a dozen and she ate.
I was gonna go 11 too, for that very same reason.
Right. That would be inductive reasoning, is that right? Deductive.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I think it's
I'm
inductive.
thinking that, I'm gonna maybe deduce that also still an 8-1. No.
Any thoughts about that
10
exercise?
pack.
Feedback about that?
I got a little mindy and noticed like some resistance come up because I was like, wait, no, like I don't need to make these thoughts or impulses go away, you know.
Yeah.
So, but then when I actually, and then I noticed how something shifted for me when I thought about being inside the train of thought versus observing, you know, kind of watching that. That was this different thing, you
So
know.
that
as
was
opposed-
pretty
Yeah, because
pivotal.
at first it was like, no, I don't need you to take these away. Like, why are we doing, you know,
Yeah.
like I've just noticed that a little bit coming up. But then with that kind of reframe about just the, you know, being in it or observing it, you know, it was different for me.
I like that too. I used to do this exercise with kids, but I kind of reformatted it. When I was in Fort Collins, the train goes right through the middle of Fort Collins and it usually stops traffic. So it'd be like, okay, you're sitting in your parents' car, all right? And you know each car is a thought, you know? So you can either follow the thought away with your mind, with your eyes, or you can just kind of let each car pass. And that's the same kind of reframe of like, because it helps me too. I was like going back over, wait, that was just an impulse. Oh, I gotta go right. Oh, that was, you know, like
Yeah.
just trying to organize it all in my mind.
Yeah, this can get pretty mindy, and I appreciate the reflection there, because I've had right here, like, the instruction, like, it's not, point isn't to have these things go away, or to have them move away, but that we shift our perspective on them to observing, as opposed to being completely fused with.
I noticed that most of my impulses and feelings also were accompanied by thought or judgment.
Right.
So like, oh, put that in there, oh, but I hadn't thought about it, so then put it in there.
Right? So one of the functions of this exercise is to help people to discriminate that, like, we typically relate to our experience as like that's just like this thing, I'm anxious. But then we're like, well, tell me about, what does that mean to you? Like, I don't know how anxiety lives in you, right? Typically, there's a complex of thoughts, feelings, and impulses, right? There's sort of memories and associations cognitively. There's usually a physiological response, and then there's impulses to act and move, which, you know, obviously, again, every single thing that we say doesn't exist. Impulses aren't things. They're just sort of categories used for help us organize our experience. And so impulses and feelings, man, it's all arbitrary. But we can kind of like, oh, that's a move to act, as opposed to like just a sensation. And so one of the functions to discriminate between the different data points of our experience, and then also that discriminating between how do we actually experience ourselves, and how do we begin to develop capacity to discriminate when we're fused and when we're a little more diffused, a little more observant in that space, right? And so helping people to develop that skill. It's a skill. It's not a character trait. It's not a sort of a genetic attribute that you have or you don't. Don't even get me going about epigenetic factors. But so helping people to learn that skill to discriminate in their own being, of like, I just thought it's all fucked, as opposed to like, it all feels like it's just gonna fall on top, or like, to like, wow, this is really intense right now, right? Like, there's sort of gradations of diffusion and acceptance. So, I like to really end most of my formal mindfulness practices with that. Can you notice the difference? You know, see if you can get a sense of the different quality of attention or awareness between sort of whether it's leaves on the stream or this one is pretty straightforward, between being on the banks of the stream and being in the stream. Everybody know the leaves on the stream exercise? Yeah. We did that in here? Yeah. No. Okay. All right. Cool. So we have an hour. I was thinking about maybe doing a matrix interview with somebody and then breaking into small groups to have everybody sort of do a matrix interview. It might be tough to have everybody do it, but we could at least be in a group and be part of that. Who needs pad and paper?
I don't have
Do-
one.
Does every single one of us need one?
No, but to start, I'd like us to all do an individual matrix real quick. What's that?
Yeah. Do you have that? Yeah, very nice.
So everybody does need
I
one?
know.
Yes,
Okay.
for now.
Electronic okay, or should I?
You might want to start with it might be easier just for formatting. So we're moving into this skills practice piece, and so I'm gonna be asking you to do things that you don't yet know how to do. Okay? Oftentimes this can be a pretty challenging place for people, and the sort of ambiguity and uncertainty is sort of naturally aversive in some ways. And so I'd like you to just draw a little quadrant for yourself right now, and I would like to take a few minutes to sort of do a matrix for yourself in this context, right? So let's start with some of the values. Like, why would you ever want to sort of get up in front of people and do a skills practice where you might be getting feedback, you might be practicing new things, you might open yourself up to learn, and in so doing, to make mistakes. So if you were to sort of get up and do a skills practice, practicing some new interventions from ACT, like, what would be important? Why would you even do that? How would that even be something that you could dignify? All right, so in the lower right, put down some of those values. Pen? love to hear some of what people put down and be open to sharing.
Flexibility.
All right.
Intimacy.
Practicing vulnerability.
Practicing with anxiety and feeling pressure.
What would be important about that?
Just allowing more of my experience to be there.
And that would serve a
Sense of wholeness
Alright.
or aliveness.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So right now I'm shifting, because right now, like, what I heard back is like, there's all these aversives that are in there, which is great, they're gonna be there, right? And so I'm wanting to sort of shift it, like, what would actually be some values here that might be more appetitive, that might be more inspirational, right?
I see.
Because if we're
Yeah.
talking about like, hey man, I just want you to work with your anxiety, like that's got a certain feel to it, right? But it's like, this is actually about being more wholly alive, about more fully alive and vital. That's a different quality, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm
totally.
saying challenging
I
a
see
bit.
that.
Like, so what would be some of the value words that we might put that working with anxiety would be serving, right? So like I heard a wholeness,
Yeah.
aliveness,
Yeah.
some sense of courage. Right. So I would put some of those words down.
Yeah,
Does that,
definitely.
that resonate for you?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. You guys see the difference there? Yeah? Okay. Because remember the sort of RFT stuff, like so like words are associated with other things. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to actually put people's experience of aversives into relational frames of values. Does that make sense? So we're trying to create and then strengthen the relationships between when they have this experience of anxiety, that also a sense of vitality might show up as part of the associational matrix, so the associational web. Like, oh, this may be what Kelly Sue was talking about. This is vital. Oh, this is an opportunity for courage. This is okay. Fuck. Here I go. Right? So we're trying to increase the chances that one of those things might show up as well in the presence of something that habitually might really be very strongly associated with avoidance behaviors and the sense of like fear and dread and can't have this, what's wrong with this. There's a vitality, courage. Maybe there's a path here, right? And maybe I can branch off this sort of well-trod road and see this little path out into the woods. And maybe by more and more times, that path will become actually an avenue. Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
I think we just did something right there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, so upper right, right? So the upper right, there's part of it's already been defined. It's like it might be doing skills practice in front of people, right? Might be one of those things in the upper right. And then if we kind of drill down a bit more into that, what other things might you engage in? You know, it's like I might say something I'm not certain about, right? That might be something on the top right. I might give feedback and ask for feedback about my feedback, right? Does that make sense? Like what then would we do? How would we show up in this practical half of this training? What might be some things that might actually move you towards some of those values on the lower right? That might be difficult, but that you believe in your best estimation could lead towards connection with these values. what are some things people would do?
Share vulnerability.
Breathe.
Nice. Good.
Laugh.
Laugh. Nice.
Take a risk.
State my opinions.
All right.
Sharing in the moment.
Good stuff. All right. Now, what would be difficult about this stuff? What might show up internally to you that actually would make this more difficult, challenging? Right? This is sort of the lower left, right? Thoughts, feelings, judgments, beliefs. Any maintenance of our armor, so to speak. It's not lack of sugar. That's a solvable problem. Anybody willing to share some of the demons? Passengers,
Self-absorption.
self-absorption, yeah.
Defensiveness.
Insecurity, fears, rejection, judgment.
Or this, it's like this full rattling feeling that happens in my chest,
Mm.
coupled with the like, I have to like hide it or avoid it or can't.
Yeah.
Judging myself, which then I in return can't find my voice.
So there's this self-judgment and self-absorption and then this really, yeah. You're all gonna find out that I'm a fraud. I don't know my shit. That's
Humor to deflect.
all right. Yeah, so that might be upper left, right? That
Yeah.
might be something that you do
Yeah.
upper left.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, so if we were to spend more time managing our lower left experience, what might we do? Right? So we might stay silent, we might deflect with humor. we would- what are some of people's favorite strategies of avoidance?
Hide my internal experience.
Argue.
Argue. Is that you, Tyson?
Yeah.
No, you won't.
Yeah, I will.
Show up in a way that others are expecting, or like what others are expecting to see for you.
It's a good strategy if you know exactly what that is.
We often do though.
Nobody expects a Spanish language. Right. We often, or at least we are convinced we do. Great.
Criticize.
Yes. Great. I might call it sick.
Eat donuts.
Eat donuts. Yeah. Cool. So I would invite you that as we do this skills practice, to just add to this matrix, right? Just to like, that this is something that you can keep as sort of an awareness practice, noticing there might be something uncomfortable that shows up, you're like, oh, this is showing up, right? Lower left. Or you might see yourself doing something like, I'm picking my nails right now. Like, oh, that might be an upper left thing, right? Or like, wow, I just asked a question that was really difficult, but it was great, well done, upper right, Or like, you might see that this might actually might help you in your intimate partnerships. Like, oh, that could be something here on the lower right. See how this context could generalize into other contexts, in which case other values might come into play, right? Because again, all the work that we're trying to do, why we do this work in the first place is to help it generalize across somebody's life domains, right? That we're not just working with people to help them pay their bills. It's about taking responsibility for their life in a meaningful way that then leads to a sense of efficacy and empowerment that then can generalize into all sorts of other domains in their life, right? Which is why we don't do things for people, unless that's a shaping move, to help them learn how to do it, because that's where they're at. Cool.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So things that are like thought processes, like rumination, or like everyone's done here, like minimize the value of something that I might not speak out loud, but it's like an away move internally. Is that's still upper left, even though it's not visible, or?
I kind of put it up in here.
In between, or
Well, it's sort of like kind of up in here.
upper, lower left?
Like upper, lower left.
Okay.
Because in a way, it's a psychological away move. It's a mental experience, so it lives in the lower. It lives in the lower half. Because I wouldn't see you doing that
Right.
unless you gestured or
Okay.
made some indication of that. And at the same time, it's part of your avoidance strategy,
Right.
right? But it's psychological in nature. It's before it gets to public
Okay.
domain.
That's so interesting, because that hasn't come up for me before, but the first ones I put were like this, self-aggression or shit talking, which is actually a choice I'm making. It's not really my experience necessarily. That's really interesting.
I had the same dilemma with rigidity, it being like mentally feeling like that locking up, but then also physically manifesting as like actually tightening, stiffening, clenching. And so I was like, on the line?
Right.
Yes.
Right. And so here we start to see the arbitrary nature and the sort of the limits of trying to fit everything into this tidy 4 quadrants. Right? Because there's choice and there's no choice in our psychological sphere. There's both. But we typically in this context, talk about how sort of in that lower left, we don't so much have choice about when and how that stuff shows up. But there is choice in sort of how we relate to it. And so it's like how we self-talk is choiceful. Although it may be such a well-worn track that it doesn't feel choice, it feels compulsive. And that may be the case. Like years and years and years of practice, and like I make a mistake and I still might have this like 12-year-old self-aggressive voice that's the first to show up in my relational, as a relational phenomenon, to a stimulus of that would be, you know, somewhere in my psyche would be categorized as failure or falling down or being weak or whatever, and then that inner bully shows up, and then it's like, and that might be the cue to awareness and acceptance, that sort of flexibility repertoire. Oh boy, wow. Okay, that happened, right? And then we go from there. Yeah. Because it doesn't always feel like our self-talk repertoire is choiceful. And there's always choice to sort of jump the track. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
We can continue the metaphor. We can always come back to that bridge, that observation deck, and see, wow, my mind is really down, like going down this track of like negative self-assessments, depressed feeling, and like shame, and impulses to hide and just throw my glassware all over the house. Good questions. Should I do a demonstration, or should we just get into small groups? Because we have about 40 minutes. I'm curious about what would be helpful.
Maybe we could just go to small groups.
Just go to small groups? Yeah. Okay.
Are you gonna like talk us through it when we're in?
So, my thinking is that everybody practice doing, or 20 minutes and then we can switch. So at least 2 people will practice doing a matrix and basically interviewing somebody. And it can be a real play or it can be a role play. And if it's a role play, just give some context and work with somebody whom you're quite familiar with, and the interviewer will be just asking open-ended questions in order to get an understanding of sort of what's important to this person, what do they do that they would want to be doing more of, like what does a good life for them really look like, what's challenging for them, and what do they know how to do in the presence of those internal challenges. Does that make sense? And so we've watched a number of them, people have done these before. So let's have core staff, let's make sure that interns are in a group with core staff and vice versa. So, and 2 groups of 3, 1 group of 4. And then we'll go, and so then there'll be somebody playing, somebody doing the real or role play, somebody doing the interview, and then the third person could also be just noting what you know, just sort of just being there as an observer and just watching the process, and know that you will be called on for some feedback for things that you notice, like other avenues that you might have explored, questions that you had about sort of like, oh, how did you go down there? What was you thinking? Does that make sense?
Is anybody actually writing into
So
the matrix?
the interviewer
Okay.
will be sort of jotting down stuff, right? And so I realize that for some people, this may be a new behavior to interview and take notes, right? It's not a repertoire that's really encouraged at Naropa, and it's one that I had to learn. And I found it to be very helpful in my practice. So I want, in the interest of flexibility, let you try something new. If this is new for you, notice what shows up. Oh, lower left.
So we're gonna get ended up basically in 3 groups.
What's up?
All told, at the end, we're gonna end up in 3 groups.
Yes.
And it
So-
probably makes sense to have at least one of the people in each of the groups that's pretty familiar with
Yes.
doing this.
Who's quite familiar with doing this? Perfect. Okay. 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And 1.
Oh wait, what am I, 3? Sorry. I just-
All right.
I think so.
Okay. Gather up.
Are we free to roam?
You are free to roam, but stay actually either, let's say conference room, family room, or here.
Okay.
How about that? So that it can just be close and I can sort of, 'cause I'm gonna wander.
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna take 2 in here because my chair goes in there. And I'm gonna pee.
Oh, you want So, one will have 2 observers.
2 people will.
One will have what?
One will have 2 observers. So,
We can stay
That
out
would be awesome.
here. How about the table? Or just chairs? We could put 3 chairs together.
I'm gonna state a preference for this one.
Okay.
Table or the open?
I like the open.
Great.
Okay.
But actually, I'm gonna pee really quick, because otherwise I'll be really distracted. Okay.
so do
Thanks. All caps,
Yeah, I like that.
spacious.
Yeah, very like kind of the opposite of boring range.
I started reading a handwriting book this summer, like handwriting analysis. And of course, it's always like take things with a grain of salt because it all depends on the person. But looking at handwriting similar to mine in the book, here are the interpretations on this handwriting was described as need for control and fear of losing control based on how ordered and uniform it is.
Yeah, I can see
That
that.
was funny.
That is interesting.
Yeah, I like that.
I'd love to read a book like that. My handwriting, when looking through old journals, it cycles, like it changes so much.
So I will suggest
And I
we'll
wonder
always
what
use
that
it.
means. Like, I'm afraid, actually. Hanging out with
I mean, it probably just means something different for each phrase you're in.
Yeah, totally.
They had written something on that, if within one letter, the person's handwriting changes, that it's like not a good sign.
Right, like schizophrenia or something.
But I mean, if you're, it's over like phases of your life, I'm sure it's.
It's more like in one journal session, like over like 20 minutes it'll change.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.